let's get into some details here. And we see that so much of what Favrasada shows us and discovers is through details in narratives. It's the stories that she tells and the stories that she hears that helps her figure out what's going on in this witchcraft system. So these are the stories that sort of set the stage for Favrasada to later be enunciated, declared bewitched, and to begin to work herself with an Unwitcher. And this is described in later chapters. These are the situations that got her into the system of witchcraft. Now, she's a little bit gives you a caveat about her work. She states that she gives way more information than she really needs to. But in fact, all of this context and detail, so much so that sometimes you can get lost in all of her descriptions, all of these details are what help her figure out her big conclusions and interpretations about witchcraft. And she'll explain sort of the dynamics of witchcraft in an incredibly intricate way toward the end. She also wants to argue that she's implicated in all these stories. She's there, despite her being an ethnographer and positing herself as a theorizing subject, who is in fact looking at theorized other subjects, other people. There's no separation. She is in the story. So the first story we hear is about the death of a mayor. The mayor, his wife, and the Unwitcher. So the death of the mayor is accompanied by rumors that the wife is thought to be crazed and believes in spells. What happens is the mayor is ill with cancer, and rumor has it that the wife is wandering around talking about spells and witchcraft and blabbing all over the place. Now, that's exactly not what someone afflicted by witchcraft does. As we'll see, they don't speak a lot. They're not supposed to speak a lot. So there are these rumors that this rational woman, this paragon of French rationality, is suddenly believing in spells and whatnot. What we do see is that right before he dies, she did briefly engage in Unwitcher. She's usually sober and rational, but this gossip spreads due to this little incident that she's obsessed with spells. Maybe, and I think there's something to this, gossip is the real power and engine of witchery. All right, so what are the events? Well, the mayor gets cancer, and he's ill and in pain. Somebody comes by and looks at how he's suffering and says, this is unnatural. This is unnatural. It's more than just cancer. So they call a faith healer called a toucheur in French, a toucher. So this faith healer is called and then does his work, like does lays of hands and whatnot. And this establishes a relationship with the dying man. We find out later that the faith healer is also an Unwitcher. They didn't call it Unwitcher. They called the faith healer, but the faith healer happened to also be an Unwitcher. The wife called him to do the healing, and then eventually she admits and says, okay, do the unwitching. But the man still dies. Now, everybody believes that the wife is obsessed with spells. When she argues, she just momentarily got caught up in things. She really doesn't believe in witchcraft. But she did say, do the unwitching. So it's a little confusing. We notice that when the man dies, the Unwitcher says that they didn't call him soon enough. And in fact, they even say their overall skepticism made him less effective. He does, incidentally, name the witch who is supposedly afflicting the man who dies. Incidentally, it's the neighbor of another person that he's unwitching. So it's all local. It's all social. No person involved with this has like specific declarative statements, like it's really straight up witchery. They say they do not believe, but still they make fearful statements about witches, worrying that if the daughter, in fact, talks to the ethnographer, Favrasada, maybe if she talks too much, then the witchcraft will come back. So they're of two minds. On one hand, they're like, no, it's not real. On the other hand, they're like, I'm really worried about this. So in fact, the daughter comes to Favrasada and she has a question. Can the evil be transmitted? She asks Favrasada because Favrasada is known to be somebody who can be talked to about such things. The girl wonders how, in fact, bad feelings, how jealousy, how anger can become an actual physical illness. Now, there's a pattern here that Favrasada notes, I think really interestingly, and that's that first people deny that there's witchcraft. Then they'll admit that there's so much going wrong that they don't have a material, positivist, rationalist understanding of it. And then finally, after that, there's the Annunciation, when someone declares another person to be suffering from witchcraft, they never declare themselves. This is a process. And this process does some interesting work. Like, they'll start the statement by talking about witchcraft by saying, I never thought it would be possible, but... So they're able to couch it in some vagueness. And in fact, it's the lack of material causation that brings forth the Annunciation. Now, after someone has been declared a victim of witchcraft, there are these steps in a process. They are announced to be suffering from witchcraft. Then they'll seek the identity of a witch, and the Unwitcher will come. And then there will be the Unwitcher will give instructions on how the person will harm the witch and protect themselves. And then the Unwitcher will go into a magic ritual behavior and ritual battle, and will give new behaviors and new activities that are therapeutic for the victims. Finally, there is interpreting the effects. How do you interpret the effects? Well, if the witch dies and the person thrives, those are the effect of the witchcraft. And then finally, indefinite transference. The Unwitcher continues to remain in the bewitched life after the witchery is resolved in a new system where they're all still contained together. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this toucher, the faith healer. Now, that's not witching or unwitching. And what I really see in this is mesmerism. There's a guy named Franz Mesmer in the 1700s. He posited a Lebensmagnetismus in German, and this became known as mesmerism, and it's out of mesmerism that eventually comes hypnotism. Mesmer and his followers, and this became a worldwide thing, people were doing this stuff everywhere, they believed that there was an invisible source that was circulating around the world, that it was circulating between all things, all human, animal, and vegetable things. Now, a powerful mesmerist or a vitalist could magnetize others. They could awaken this energy within them and grant them the ability to also magnetize other people and also to manipulate that ever-circulating energy. This energy is called magnetic fluid. Magnetic fluid can be manipulated. It uses the analogies of magnetic fields. Now, magic and magnets have always gone together. If a magnet can attract things from across the room, well, so I must be able to do that also through magic. If this sounds at all familiar to you, it sounds exactly like how people talk about energy. That guy's got a bad energy. Or when you talk about Reiki, where there's these progressive initiations and learning secret symbols, so one can lay hands on a person and manipulate their interior energy. Hands of lights, auras, all this comes out of mesmerism, or at least mesmerism came from all of this. And mesmerism was the first system to name that energy and begin to think about ways to manipulate that energy. Now, in witchery, however, the witch steals vital energy from the victim. The Unwitcher, in fact, comes seeing the witch is pulling that vital energy out of the victim. And they come and they stand in, using their own power to get between the victim and the witch, short-circuiting that cycle of leeching away the energy from the victim. Keep thinking about circuits and flows of energy. And then eventually, the Unwitcher steals the vital energy from the witch, killing them. We do have a phrase called animal magnetism in English, and that's generally described to be someone who has an incredible charisma, especially a sexuality, someone who's very attractive. The notion of animal magnetism, the magnetism is not about magnets and like physical magnets and metal, but is in fact about this type of magnetism or manipulation of vital energies. So the story unfolds. So the Annunciator and others declare the identity of the witch. The Annunciator declares the identity to be someone who hates them. Now, what we find is that the Annunciator will often name the witch, but the Unwitcher will come back and say, no, you got that all wrong. I'll tell you who the real person is. So the mayor dies. And the Unwitcher states that he died because the Unwitcher was called too late. He also argues that the skepticism of the family made it too hard for him to be effective. The wife has an attitude that she really doesn't believe. She was just caught up for a second, but enough to get that faith healer there, and that faith healer puts her into the system of witchcraft. Favrasada effectively learns all this by stepping into this world. She's not been able to get anything for months when asking all these questions. So she's able to ask questions and talk to the daughter of the mayor. And she doesn't just document the slander and the gossip. This is where she finds out the actual dynamics of what's going on in the system of witchcraft. She finally meets the wife, and when that happens, the wife gets really sick. She's taken to a local bone setter after a doctor can't help and a chiropractor can't help, so almost to a folk healer. When she returns to meet Favrasada, Favrasada is declared to be caught. It's thought that the patterns that arose in the wife of being bewitched again is due to Favrasada exposing her to witchcraft, because Favrasada was caught as well. So as a result of meeting this wife and asking questions, eventually she comes to be in the witch system. All right, take a little break, do a little dance, do some yoga.